All of this with the global warming and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
So here, Mr. President, catch this.
But I know we're talking about climate change. Well, look, I don't know that that is a resolved issue in science today.
One of the main reasons I wanted to run for Congress is that I realized that we don't have scientists represented in our government at the highest levels. When I work on active volcanoes, you are literally at the mouth of hell. It is a fiery inferno, and you are there to do a job, and you have to make sure that the whole crew is safe. Everyone is responsible for everybody else's safety. And to me, that's how I see taking on the challenge that we're going to see with climate change. We will see more hurricanes, more flooding. Out here in California, we're going to see more wildfires. I saw a plume of black smoke coming up as we were going up the 210, and I said, that's a fire, and this is hot, this is bad. And then as we drove past, the flames were at least 50 feet high already. And I mean, I could see them, and I was like, that is an angry fire.
It was about 2 o'clock. All of a sudden, I hear my wife running down from the side of the house screaming, we gotta go, we gotta go! So I come out to the backyard over here, and I look out here, and this whole valley just was on fire. I grabbed some shovels and went down there.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I don't know how firemen do it because I was soaking wet. It was so hot down there. Bottom of my soles on my tennis shoes were melting.
Wow.
All I could think of was my house was going to be gone.
But even that night.
I want to give you a hug. I'm so sorry. Yes. You can't control the weather, but what you can control is how you deal with it and how you decide to push on. So we need to get people in office who not only accept the science, but believe in the science and say, look, we can solve this by mitigating and adapting. We can become the global hub for green tech innovation. And that's the future that I see. We're creating jobs, we're sparking growth.
But I'm hopeful because right now we have the opportunity to put new leaders into office who are bold and courageous and able to take on challenges like climate change.
Because America is its best when we have a massive, overwhelming problem to face. We put a man on the moon. We worked our way through the Depression and the Dust Bowl. We got through World War II. And that's what America is built on, overcoming these massive challenges.
So it's time for us to do what we do best as Americans and rise up.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to We the People. That was a wonderful campaign ad for Jess Phoenix. She's running in California's 25th Congressional District, and we are lucky to have her on We the People tonight. She is a volcanologist that has nothing to do with Star Trek, although she's also a Star Trek fan, and we were having a long conversation about that because you guys know where I am, Star Trek, right? Amazing person. Really excited to have her on We the People. Thank you for joining us, Jess Phoenix.
Thank you so much for having me, John. This is it's awesome to be here.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. So, everybody, as you know, we also have the lovely Laura Livengood here, who is with us, even though she is not feeling that well. And Laura is going to take questions several times during the show. Laura, please explain to them how that goes.
Well, you who are watching us live have the special opportunity to ask questions of our guest in real time. So please, if you have a question for Jess, tag me or write the word question, all in caps, and I will try to get them to her during the show. And I'll also post her website so you can check out the basics ahead of time. And I think a couple of members of her team might actually be in chat and they can answer questions as well.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura. Jess.
Yes.
So first of all, I didn't, I've seen a lot of your videos and stuff. I didn't realize you've been on Discovery Channel and all these other channels. So now I'm a little intimidated because you got some big airtime. Thank you for running. I just want to say thank you for running. We were talking about Bernie Sanders in the beginning. Just tell me where you stand with Bernie Sanders and 2016 and what made you decide to run today?
Well, I supported Bernie in 2016 in the primary, even though I'm here in California and we all know what happened here. And after that, I backed Hillary because I totally understand. I thought I totally understood what Trump posed as a risk to our country. But even I underestimated how bad it would be. I think a lot of people did, but we knew it wasn't going to be good. And Bernie really got me and my husband excited. And it was because the message spoke to so many things that make so much sense. They're so logical. And I am a scientist. I like logic and I like facts and I like evidence-based policymaking. And I think that was sort of the breath of fresh air and a bit of kind of getting rid of politics as usual. And I think that our country is primed and ready for something totally different. And I think that, Bernie started it, and I think we're going to have a whole bunch of really awesome candidates. Hopefully I'm one of them who can help carry that momentum into a better future for the country.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I thank you so much for running. We need more women running, and we definitely need scientists running. I appreciate that. You're a volcanologist, which I just want you to take a moment and explain to everybody what that means, even though you are a Star Trek fan. It is not about Vulcans, right?
No, although I do get that all the time, and that's largely because in Italy and other places in Europe, they spell it Vulcan, Vulcan, volcanologist. But here in America and most other places in the world, it's VOL. So it's volcanology, volcano science. Right. And so really what volcano scientists do is we study active volcanoes, and sometimes we study extinct volcanoes. And the holy grail of volcanology is to be able to predict eruptions. And that's not something that we can do yet. Volcanology is a pretty young science. We moved into the modern, the really big modern era of it with the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. So if you think about that, that is probably within the lifetime of many of your viewers. And it's we've been going like gangbusters ever since with collecting data and with understanding volcanoes more fully. But we are still in the early stages of it as a science. So it's a really exciting place to be.
I didn't realize that was the marker for kind of the beginning of modern volcanology. That is cool, because I remember Mount St. Helens big time. Remember when that happened, and you can look at it today from where I am, and where I used to be in Portland. You can see it, and it's it's pretty crazy. We're unable. You said we're unable to detect eruptions today.
Predict
eruptions. To predict, detect them. Of course, you're right. Predict. My apologies. Yeah. However, what you do is climate related. It's very tied into the climate, and so we can see signs of what's going on with our climate, what happens when a volcano goes off, the devastation, the destruction, what happens to the atmosphere, right? We know all these things.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that I do lots of different science research. That's the neat thing about being a geologist. That whole branch of study is actually really broad. Volcanoes are a specialty within it, but I've done all sorts of natural hazards. I've done climate research in Peru, in the Western U.S., in Hawaii. And it's something that you can observe actually all around the world. So, everything is connected. It's all a series of systems, and the rocks are one part of it, but it's everything from the microbes to the atmosphere, that it's all tied in together, and it all is affected by climate change.
Right. Thank you, because that's exactly where we were going. That video, that campaign ad, which is awesome, by the way. Talking about fire, right, and the devastation that happened in California, your district, which is, I'm going to show a map of it in a minute here, but it's really a desert part of California, but it was experienced the Rye Fire, and then you mentioned a fire that was last year. We've seen an increase in the fire season. What is that like in California now?
Well, I will tell you, we are kind of on edge anytime the wind kicks up around here, because California came out of 5 years of drought, and everything was really, really dry. Then last January, we got a ton of rain, and everything bloomed. And so, of course, that meant there was a lot more vegetation to burn if something were to ignite. And we have these Santa Ana winds here, which blow, and they are hot, and they are dry, and they're strong. And it was the perfect kind of conditions for that. And I am somebody, I do animal rescue, and I've worked with horses for like 27 years. I don't even know now. It's been forever.
Wow.
And since I was 8. So I guess that's 28 years now.
That's awesome.
And so I've helped evacuate horses and wild animals during the last couple of fires that have gone around. And so, I mean, when you're trying to get large prey animals into confined spaces to get them away from a fire, when there's soot falling everywhere and you can smell the smoke and you're choking on it, you know exactly how important it is to make sure that we're ready for climate change. I mean, that's just one component of it. It's not caused by climate change. I get that all the time. A lot of people will say, oh, you know, climate change doesn't cause these fires. No, it doesn't, but it makes them worse and it makes them more frequent. And that's what we have to worry about.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that. I think we're learning. I'm showing a slide here of your plan versus their plan, which is basically the opposite of everything there. And you mentioned the Paris Climate Agreement, but I think if there's one, we're going to talk about that in a second, but if there's one thing I think Americans are starting to grow up on, is that global warming doesn't just mean warm planet, that we're dealing with extreme weather, and that climate change has caused this extreme weather or exacerbates extreme weather, correct?
Right. And, you know, global warming is kind of a misnomer because, yes, the average temperature is ticking upwards. But, you know, really what we see is like, here's a good example with the Arctic getting warmer. You actually see that there's less of an ability for those polar cold winds to be kept up there in the Arctic region. And so they're sweeping down. And that's what's hammering the East Coast right now is winds from the polar vortex. And you know, that's because one part of the climate is warming and it affects the rest. And we're going to keep seeing those chain reactions. It's, like I said, it's a big system.
Right. And we don't really know what all, I mean, this wasn't predicted, this massive meeting of the Atlantic being 78 degrees and an Arctic polar vortex coming down. I mean, nobody knew that was going to meet like that, right?
We're still learning. And I mean, they're doing a good job. But if we have things like what's happening with Trump wanting to cut the budget for NASA's Earth science research, which he did, and then also threatening to cut the funding for earthquake early warning systems, tsunami warning systems, hurricane warning systems, and volcano warning systems, we'll basically be flying blind. That's dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, not to mention the fact that we're not really doing anything that we need to be doing to sequester carbon, to try to reduce global warming. And I want to go to California specifically on that. Your opponent, we're going to talk about his record in a minute here, Steve Knight, not King, although very similar in their voting record. I want to talk about Jerry Brown in California because he comes across as an environmental governor, and a lot of people, yay, Jerry Brown. He's fracking the hell out of California. What do you think of that policy? What do you think of fracking?
So fracking was an interesting one to me because, you know, as a scientist, I want to wait until I see facts and data and evidence. So when I first heard about fracking, 15 plus years ago, I said, well, I'm not sure. It sounds like it could be problematic, but I'm not sure. So, I started to read what I could find about it. And then when the first big study about it came out, I believe it was out of Yale, I read it and went, oh yeah, okay. Like they're saying we need additional data, but it looks like the fracking is having an effect not only on local water supply, but also on earthquakes. And, I started out wanting to be a tectonicist. Like I wanted to do plate tectonics. So earthquakes and subduction zones and stuff that smashes into other stuff. And, we have that here in California. And that actually is one of the reasons why fracking is so hazardous. And we should definitely not have it in California. I mean, we see what it's doing in Oklahoma and they're getting earthquakes out there. And there are ancient faults that we don't even know about still, even here in California. And there are tons of active faults. And just so everybody watching at home knows, for purposes of building codes in California, active is basically a fault that is ruptured within the last 10,000 years. So if something ruptured within 15,000 years, we might not be calling it active, but it's still there. And we're littered with faults. We are stupid with faults here in California. And we always say geologists love our faults. We do. But it's really dangerous and we shouldn't be fracking here. We have other effective ways of energy generation and fracking is not the answer.
No, it's not. I mean, and you don't need to be a scientist of any caliber to know that. I mean, you got two plates rubbing against each other right there. Mm-hmm. That's drilling holes bad, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, there's faults all over the place. Like if you, Griffith Park is one of the big parks here in Metro LA. And if you go to Griffith Park, you can stand on one part of a trail and see 3 different faults just from one viewpoint. And and actually, the big leak in the natural gas storage facility, Aliso Canyon, that happened a couple years back, that released so much methane into the atmosphere. That whole storage facility is actually underlain by the Santa Susana Fault, which has the potential to rupture at magnitude 8. So the 100+ wells there that are, sealing off the natural gas storage, those are old. I mean, they're all 50+ years old. So you're looking at something that is really, really delicately contained, and it's in an area with a ton of people, and it makes people sick. It's just not something we need, and we can do better, and we can do it smarter.
Agreed. We can do it without the fossil fuel industry completely.
Yeah.
I think.
Yep. And we got to be moving that way. I mean, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we need to be working on it. And, fossil fuels are fossils, they're going to go the way of the dinosaur. And the sooner we get on board with saying, we need to be, and this is one of my big issues actually on the campaign, is I actually want our district, California's 25th, and then the surrounding areas here in Southern California, we need to be the global hub of green tech R&D. And that's something that I'm really advocating for, and I'm really passionate about, because we actually have the knowledge base, and we have the skills in manufacturing and fabricating to make that happen. And That's how we deal with automation and people losing jobs to that, and artificial intelligence gaining more of a foothold. We have to balance it with saying we have good green jobs here for both like the knowledge workers and the people who work with their hands and make things.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we can talk about your district and what's happening there. Okay, so California, we obviously need to do more in terms of climate. We're going to talk about the Paris Climate Agreement a little later on, because that's the top of your list. But your district, you were telling me that Steve Knight, who's a 98.9, I think, percent Trump voter, that's his record with Nate Silver, 538. Nate said he was only going to vote 48%. So that's he's like an overachiever in that. He signed on to the GOP tax plan, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And that directly hurts people in our district. It's unbelievable how bad his decision-making process is, or non-existent. I'm not sure which.
Well, I think he belongs in sales. He's got teeth, looks like he could sell you your own children.
SF Weekly has a really great article about him. I'm not gonna bring up the name of it, but if people look up Steve Knight, SF Weekly, you can find it. I didn't say it.
All right. No negativity. I'll do all the negativity about Steve.
No, because he's probably a fine person, but he's voting against our interests, and that's the problem.
Right. That's all that really matters, right? This is why we hire reps. We're taking a look at your district map here, and just want to show everybody that you've got this kind of back section of California right up against Edwards Air Force Base up there. And so that's we'd call that rural. We call that desert, right? What is the makeup of your district? What's going on out there?
It's interesting. It is a blend of suburbs, the Santa Clarita community, Simi Valley. There are some older homes there, and I say older, I mean 50s onwards, so not that old, especially not compared to the East Coast. But there's, and then you go up through Acton, where I live, Agua Dulce and Acton. And for the Star Trek fans, Agua Dulce is where they filmed the fight with the Gorn.
Oh, nice.
At Vasquez Rocks. And anyway, I live 7 minutes from there. But cool. And then you keep going up through Acton, and it becomes very rural. You get people with little parcels of land, 5 acres here, 3 acres there, 10 acres there. And then you go up to Lancaster and Palmdale. And those are people still commute into LA from Palmdale and Lancaster. And it's a 2+ hour commute. Easy. One way.
Jeez,
yeah.
Wow.
Easy. And it's people out there, there are a lot of aerospace manufacturing jobs out that way. And then in the Santa Clarita Valley, we have Six Flags Magic Mountain, and then there's a lot of hospitality and retail down there. And then we've got some biotech and things like that. And then across in Simi, there's a bit more retail. There's some manufacturing still. In fact, my husband's parents worked, they lived in Simi and Moore Park, and they worked in aerospace manufacturing when he was a kid. So,
okay.
Yeah, there's a long tradition of people working in those sort of jobs around here. But people will, they'll go into LA sometimes, or, I know some people who never go down into LA proper, but it's all part of LA County except for Simi, which is Ventura County. So they just stuck a little bit of Ventura in to make the congressional district, but it's mostly LA County.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense. So it sounds to me like you've got people ready to be transitioned into other projects with renewable energy, if they're already working in the aerospace industry and they could easily go there. You've got plenty of land for solar and wind and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. And we actually have a really successful electric bus manufacturing company in Lancaster.
Really?
It's one of the most successful ones in the world. And so, our community's primed and ready for this. We could be that global hub for green tech, pretty quickly. We just need to have the federal investment and backing and get people going. That's what we're looking for, having that leadership at that level.
You could do that. I think Steve Knight has some other ideas. He takes a lot of money from defense, aerospace, a lot of money from a lot of places like that. And it seems to me like he prefers to promote our war efforts in that regard.
Yeah. Well, it was really surprising to see his voting record and where he gets his money from. In fact, he only gets about a third of his donations from individuals. So basically the opposite of Grassroots. His money mainly comes from PACs and dark money, from the GOP. So he's somebody who's really benefited a lot from Citizens United. And he also has name recognition. His dad, Pete Knight, authored Prop 22 at the state assembly level, and that was anti-marriage equality. And then Knight himself was in favor of Prop 8, which was also anti-marriage equality. And it's just really a shame that we have somebody in office who is so homophobic and so opposite of the values of the people in the community, who, by the way, voted for Hillary by 7%.
And that I was surprised. I didn't realize that, because I was thinking that rural area was red, or close to. That's impressive, right? Not anymore.
Yeah, it used to be. I mean, it was a Republican stronghold for a long time, but it has changed so much. And we have a lot more Latino communities, African Americans. We have people from the Asian and Pacific Islander community who have realized it's a lower cost of living than LA proper, and you've got access to all sorts of things. We have some really good schools in the district in different areas, and we have some others that need a little more help. But it's a really fantastic community, and that desert weather is amazing. And then when that's the high desert, that's like Lancaster and Palmdale. And then when you're down, in Santa Clarita and Simi, you get a little bit more of the true Mediterranean Southern California feel.
Nice. As long as we can keep it from going on fire.
Right, there is that. Climate change.
Right. We're going to get back to that. I want to take a moment and see if there's any questions in the audience with Laura Livengood. Do we have anything going on, Laura?
We do. I've got several good questions. Decide where I want to start. Ben Jackson asks, as a woman in science, what can government do to enable more women to enter the sciences, and what impact might that have on the world?
I would love to see the government providing some initiatives to spark creative efforts by young women in particular. Studies have shown that a lot of young girls sort of fall out of love with science around middle school. And that's really unfortunate. And I took a science class in high school. I took chemistry and had a terrible professor or teacher and hated it, and decided I wasn't going to become a veterinarian because of it. I later bounced back and thought, maybe I'll still try. But it really was, I got to a point where I thought, science isn't for me. And look, here I am. So, I think if we have the government saying, look, here's a design competition, here's a way that we can get kids to innovate, work on teams, sending more kids to the Intel ISEF, which is an international science fair, just getting schools who don't have strong science programs to have better ones. In fact, my nonprofit, Blueprint Earth, actually works with a STEAM academy here in LA. LAUSD has started to push STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, as something they want to promote in lower income communities with students who are mainly Hispanic, Latino, or African American or Asian American. And it's been great working with these kids, because all they need is somebody saying, you can do this, you can be a scientist. And so the government needs to get behind programs that are going to encourage that. Because that's how you solve it. You give people the opportunity. You open the door, you basically level that playing field, and they'll come. We've seen that with my nonprofit too. We've had 76% women participate, and that's at the college and university level. And that's a science nonprofit, hard science. So when people tell me women don't do science, I strongly disagree.
That's awesome. Thank you. Great answer.
I do have a couple more questions if we have time to.
Please. Yeah.
Bram asks, what does Jess think of promoting single payer in California, and how would she intend to pay for it?
Yes. Well, I'm actually in favor of Medicare for all countrywide. And I think that it's a really good solution, because Medicare has such a high satisfaction rating. And I've been in favor of that since day one. I think that we've seen some really good efforts in California to move towards single payer. But I think that, we got to do it nationwide. That's just where my bottom line is. And, the government already covers 2/3 of healthcare. right now. The government pays 2/3 of the bill. So we're basically saying, look, we're already paying for most of this, and we have such good satisfaction ratings and such low overhead related to most other insurance outcomes, that this is something we need to find the funding for. And I think we can actually find a lot of funding from programs that may be overfunded in certain areas, like certain elements of the Department of Defense. There are some areas in there, I think, where we could be looking for money. Plus, I hate when people tell me we don't have funding and we just gave a $1.5 trillion tax cut to billionaires and corporations. So that, I want to get in there and roll up my sleeves and get to work with finding the money, because it exists, and we also have to prioritize it. If we don't have people who are elected, who are willing to say, look, this is our priority, we got to get everybody good coverage, and we've got to make it so that they're not broke to have it. And it's never going to happen. We've got to elect the right people first and foremost.
Agreed. Absolutely. We have the budget. We have the budget for whatever we have the people in the office that want to have the budget for. That's basically how it goes.
What are our priorities? That's what you got to say. What are the priorities of the people you elect? They should represent the will of the people.
Yes.
That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great answer. Laura, another
question. I think that your district has Air Force bases?
Edwards Air Force Base.
We're next to it. Yeah, we're like right next to it. It's technically just over the line, but it's like a lot of people from the community live in our district.
Okay. The question is, what do you think of the military-industrial complex? And that comes from Metalhead.
Good question. I think that it's out of control at the moment in terms of like the spending versus the result that we achieve. I think that the military is great. Like, don't get me wrong. My mom is a terrorism and foreign counterintelligence expert. She worked in the FBI, and so did my dad. And so national security is actually a big priority to me, and preparing for all sorts of threats, whether it's a natural hazard, or whether you're talking about a man-made threat, like from a terrorist source, or you're talking about like a cyber threat. So I'm really big in favor of national security, and we need to be funding it, but we have to be smarter, and we can't just be having people run roughshod over the system, bidding and well, I should say not bidding, basically getting non-competitive contracts and then overcharging. I mean, we are wasting so many taxpayer dollars, and I think that we can definitely rein that in and do a much better job of how we spend our money. We got to spend smart. You can't just spend and throw money at problems. You have to be intelligent in your decision making.
Agreed. And you can't just spend all your money on blowing up your problems.
Yes. I mean, diplomacy is actually a fine art and a skill, and we can't just be tweeting about nuclear buttons and their relative sizes, because that's just nuts. And, we actually need people in office who can engage in diplomacy at every level, whether your conflict is with the town next door or whether it's with North Korea. Like, you have to be able to talk to people.
Without making it a penis contest. Yes. That seems to be our Congress debates at a 8th grade level. It was 9th grade. It got downgraded, just so you know. The president now represents us like a toddler. So we really need more scientists in office. We need people who can actually speak coherently about the issues that we face as human beings,
Well, and make it simple too. I mean, that is a problem that a lot of scientists will say that we've had for a long time, is we've kept to ourselves. And a lot of that is because we were afraid of losing research funding. Robert Oppenheimer, one of these so-called fathers of the atomic bomb, was persecuted by the House Un-American Activities Committee because he spoke up about his beliefs, about how we needed to rein in nuclear power I should say, the atomic power. And, because of that, the scientific community really got quiet and didn't speak up. And now, we've also been perceived as being distant and unable to explain complex concepts in simple ways. And so a lot of scientists, me included, we've been working really hard to connect with the public and say, look, like, my big thing is we're all born as scientists. I mean, the day you enter the world, you are observing. You're making observations, you're testing little hypotheses, particularly when you start to be a toddler and you put everything in your mouth. Is this edible? Does this taste good? That is actually doing science in a way. And, as you get older, you can either choose to continue with that, or a lot of people have the love of exploration and questioning and being curious just forced out of them. And I think that the more we invite people to the table and say, look, science isn't scary, science is accessible and it's fun and it's relevant, that's when we're going to see, curiosity come back. And that's how we fight the ignorance that we see being flung around from Trump and others.
Agreed. I love what you said there about as a toddler, we're putting stuff in our mouths, and that's observation. The problem is you're saying scientists are working on ways to make things simpler so people understand. You know, we have to meet you halfway there. Uneducated citizens that are using, my eyes tell me that it's cold. I mean, that's basically...
Yeah, that's a good point. You got to balance it. But again, that speaks to education. And we have a person in charge of our Department of Education who has no background in education. I used to teach college at Cal State LA, and I still work with students all the way from elementary school up to university. And I will tell you, DeVos and her agenda are just atrocious. I mean, it is one of the scariest things about what Trump is doing. He's doing so many scary things, but yes. Having Betsy DeVos in there, who is actively undermining the quality of our public school education, is just toxic. I mean, because without an educated population who believe in the integrity of scientists, or not scientists, but the scientific method and scientific process, and who understand what that means, that's really, really scary for the future, because we are a society that is becoming ever more dependent on technology. Right. And so we cannot have people who are afraid of science or anti-science running things, or, in positions where it affects their everyday life. You use technology all the time. I mean, we're on the internet right now, and you can't say, well, I believe in this science, but not that science, because science is true whether or not you believe in it. So we have to teach people that.
I have a shirt that says that on it with an expletive.
Oh yeah. Okay. I know the version without the expletive. That was Neil deGrasse Tyson. You got to cite your sources, but
right.
It's a true principle, and the expletive might make it a little bit more exciting.
Because people do with science like they've been taught to do with religion. Pick what you like out of it and toss the rest. And we can't run a society we can't survive as a species, right? We're not going to survive as a species. I just want to bounce back to climate, because it really is the crux. I mean, other than fixing our corrupt government, climate is the big thing we have. And you were talking in the green room about bringing it on as a national security issue and talking about it as a national security issue. We see a lot of different reports. The Hansen report just came out. We know about extreme weather. We know there's a lot of different data with a lot of different numbers. I want your doomsday clock. Where do you see because to me, we got like 10 years. We
need to be fixing it already. I mean, working on solutions. And, we're not, here's the thing. I'm not saying all climate change is man-made, because it's not. And our fancy science term is anthropogenic, which literally means man-made. But the man-made stuff is what we have to be concerned about. And, the Earth's climate shifts over time. We see that in the rock record, but rocks don't lie. I mean, they can't. So what the rocks show us is that the climate has been shifting, but now the pace of change is accelerating, and it is becoming dangerous for multiple species, including us, because we like to live in coastal areas and sea level is rising, et cetera. So, I mean, to me, there really isn't a final doomsday clock, because the planet's going to do what the planet's going to do. It will outlive us. But if we want our kids and our grandkids and their grandkids to have a nice place to live, a safe place to live, one where they can grow food and exist and, enjoy beautiful sunny days, where you don't have to wear a parka all the time, or, you're not boiling to death, you need to get on climate change now. And that means we have to do it from the local level all the way to the global level. I mean, this is everybody's problem. It's probably the closest thing to a truly global issue that there is these days. And it is a national security issue, not just for the US, but for every nation, because, it's a threat multiplier. That's a good term, because it really takes whatever is happening and it ratchets up the pressure. And you see it with terrorism, even when there's a scarcity of resources, like we'll see in terms of land or food, terrorists actually have a stronger foothold. And speaking of food security, if you're not able to grow crops in the same places that you have been historically, it's going to be really hard to distribute food efficiently now. I mean, we already fail to distribute a lot of it correctly now. And so we're going to see more of that. And then we're going to see more people moving. We're going to see more climate migrants from different areas. And I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I was at an event here in Southern California, and I met a woman who said, yeah, I lived in New Jersey during Superstorm Sandy, and my house got wiped out. And then it got hit really hard again, I think the next year too. And so then she said, forget it, I'm moving to California. And I said, well, we have earthquakes and wildfires, but I mean, that's the thing is, it doesn't matter where you go, you will feel the effects of climate change at some point. And probably sooner rather than later. So let's get on it.
Right, right. I mean, if you really want to look at trying to escape damage, look at North Dakota or Canada. I mean, but even still, that's just avoiding boiling but you're still going to freeze. Everywhere is going to get affected. I mean, our where I am in the Willamette Wine Valley, we're having bizarre weather, strange. It shouldn't be as cold as it is. It shouldn't be as warm as it gets. None of us are going to be able to avoid it. You mentioned in your plan for climate that you think we need to sign back onto the Paris Climate Agreement, and that may be nice, a gesture, but it's really not binding. It's not comprehensive. If you had control of the dials, how would you address climate change as a nation? What would you do?
So I think education is, again, fundamental to our approach. And one really good model, and I mentioned it in that video, is the Dust Bowl. This was something that people couldn't have anticipated. Basically, the Depression was going on, people were out of work, and then we had this crazy shift where the climate became really hot and dry in the center of the country, and we had these punishing winds. And because the area had been over-farmed, you had people planting stuff and then abandoning their fields when the crop prices had dropped. So you had just dirt, right. Hundreds of thousands of acres, actually millions of acres of just dirt. And so when the winds came through, it was dropping these crazy black dusters, as they were called. They were going all the way to Washington, D.C. Oh, wow. And yeah, I mean, it was massive. And people were starving. They were losing their livelihoods. This was a nationwide crisis that was intensified by the Depression. And FDR was in charge. And Roosevelt said, I'm not a scientist, which is what we hear from politicians all the time, right?
Right.
But he said, I'm not a scientist. I'm going to go find some scientists and I'm going to have them take care of it. So what they did was they actually got soil scientists and forestry scientists, and they had them study the problem. And then they implemented a solution. I know, really novel, right? But they actually, they actually had people, and in order to get Congress to play along, there was an epic moment, there were many of them, but where they actually had one of the soil scientists who was tasked with finding a solution, speaking in front of Congress as a black duster was sweeping towards the Capitol. And they were notifying him as it was getting closer and closer. And so when he made his ask of Congress for the funding, the Capitol was engulfed by this black dust cloud. And he got his funding. So hopefully we don't have to be that dramatic this time around, but they actually engineered solutions. And this is where the education piece comes in. The scientists and the government work together with local communities to get them to plant things differently and to manage their land in a more efficient way and to manage their water in a more efficient way. And that is actually how we got fix the problems with the Dust Bowl. And of course, the black dusters tapered off too. The weather changed, which was helpful. But, it was really the fact that people pulled together, and there was this massive education campaign that went out and said, hey, people at the local level, you're suffering. We need to make this better. So what my priority would be getting the education out there, actually allocating some money to saying to people, specific to your region, here's what you're going to be feeling as far as climate effects, and here's what you can do on a local level, and then here's what you need to ask of your local and state and federal legislators. And then, that's how we get things going. But we need committees working on this, both at the congressional level and committees of scientists. And we need to be sharing our information and our technological workarounds to the problems with other countries. So that's why Paris actually is good, is because it's in accord with so many other nations that it shows we're all on the same page. And so I think that symbolically, the U.S. does actually need to be on the same page. And we all have to be stepping together on this one because it is such an important issue for everyone.
I agree. I mean, and it looks like most nations that get what's going on have said we're going to go beyond the Paris Climate Agreement. We just all agree we need to be doing this, and I think we're the only one left, right? Like there's us and one other country, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's Syria. Yes. Unless I think Syria signed on, so I think now it's just us. It may just be us.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes, even the countries we sell weapons to sign on to climate change. It doesn't make any sense.
So yeah, it's a problem, and that's the thing is I have faith that people are listening and they are paying attention. And the thing is, the science itself doesn't lie. The facts are there, and I don't know any scientist taking payoffs from Russia to put out data says one thing or the other. So there is no big climate. It is not, as in that video, Trump said, a money-making industry, because if it was, he would be all over it. I guarantee you. That man has never met a money-making industry he doesn't like. So what's the money-making industry is still fossil fuels. And we can make money off of green tech, but we got to get in on it now.
Well, I was just going to say, the money. We're already seeing the financial reports. Divestment is coming. We're divesting from fossil fuels. The World Bank said they're getting rid of fossil fuels. More people are moving into the money is in green tech. The thing is, Trump isn't a very smart businessman. So
Good point. But he also has friends. He's, more than anything, he's got to keep his friends happy and his donors happy. Now that he's got donors, he likes to be seen as, the guy with the power. And so right now he can say to the fossil fuel people, I'm going to agitate the left and the climate conscious people in the middle and on the right. And because there are some, trust me, there are. And then he knows climate change is real. Trump knows. I mean, he had an application to build a seawall at his golf course in Ireland, and it cited the reason as climate change because the sea levels are rising. So he knows damn well that climate change is real. It's just that this works for his political messaging to say that it's not. And the problem is it's going to cost lives. But as we've all seen with his tweets, he doesn't care whose lives he plays fast and loose with. It doesn't matter to him.
Well, agreed. And you could make that same statement of all establishment politicians, right? That whether they're GOP or a Dem establishment, they're basically doing things for their donor base, and they don't really care about the people.
And I think that's a problem. I think a lot of people have realized that, many of the career politicians have become just so tied to their large donors, whether those are corporates, corporate PACs, or whether it's the dark money, or whether it's just very large repeat donors. It's just the money in politics is causing so much of a problem. And, I am a huge proponent of overturning Citizens United and of, publicly funded elections at all levels. But right now, of course, particularly the federal level, I just think it's atrocious what money has done to our political system. And it really, I used to play basketball, so I'm going to use a basketball term. It boxes people out. So nice. they don't have a chance. Right. It's like if you are, let's say, a single parent or someone who comes from, a lower income background, you're not going to know a bunch of rich people. I mean, I don't know a bunch of rich people. I am meeting a lot of them through this process, but I did not have a network of friends who I could call up and say, hey, I need to raise, $300,000 in 3 months. Can you do that for me? Like, we're scientists. Again, there is no big climate. So right. No big volcano that's paying me bank to say things about volcanoes. No. So Earth, yeah, big Earth. I wish there was, but no, there isn't. So, I mean, basically, yeah, if we don't fix this process, if we don't get the big money out of politics, we're just going to see more of the same. And the career politicians will be allowed to continue to do what they're doing, which hurts everyday people. Absolutely. And on that note, we're looking at your individual support. This is from Federal Election Commission. You've raised. We're looking at progressive candidates going against establishment. You're actually doing fairly well, considering. So you've got like $126,000. This shows here, and that's mostly individual contributions. $121,000 coming from individual contributions. Very deep contrast from the four major competitors that we have in here. You're one of the four, but we got Brian, Katie, and Steve there. Everybody see Steve? Do you see that? That's Steve. Look at that smile. Steve's ready to make sure you die in your district. He's got donors to take care of. Anyway, and he's sitting on $670,000. I'm sure he's going to get all he needs from the GOP, right? Do you think he has a chance? Do you think he was born and raised there But yeah, well, he's got the name recognition. So that's why the grassroots approach, I think, is the right way to go. And actually, when the next quarter's fundraising numbers come out, you're going to see even more individual donations from my camp. We had a nice quarter last quarter, particularly for like a pure grassroots campaign. So yeah, it was really good. Those results for the Federal Election Commission will be out the 15th of this month. So these things work in quarterly cycles. So we've got another 3-month period going on now. But yeah, I mean, I think Steve has the GOP's super deep pockets going for him. So Absolutely. He doesn't like to get out and talk to voters. This is what we've noticed. So he has had only a couple of town halls with a lot of pressure being put on him to have those. And at the town halls, he's lied to people at the town halls. He said, I think Trump should release his taxes. I'm going to ask him to release his taxes. And then he went back the same week and voted that Trump didn't have to release his taxes. So, I think he's having a harder time justifying what he does to the people in the district, particularly because most of the people here, voted for Hillary and,
Right.
A few voted for him. But I think we can really eat away at his name recognition advantage by, being out, being present in the community. And I'm working on mobilizing a massive amount of volunteers because I want people knocking on doors. I want to be talking to people, having coffee with them. I'd say beer, but I'm a terrible geologist and I don't drink beer. So a beverage of your choosing. But I drink other alcoholic beverages, just not beer. Sorry, craft brewers. But I will say that that's the important thing is connecting with people because you can't just represent your deep, big money donors. I mean, most of them don't live in our district and you've got to talk to the people, even if you disagree. And one of the things that I've learned and what I tell everybody who's thinking about running or wants to know more about the political process or wants to find, say, a perfect candidate, there is no perfect candidate. There is no candidate you will agree with 100% of the time unless you are that candidate. So unless you're going to run for office, what you need to do as a responsible, informed citizen is find people who you can agree with on most things or people you agree with on the things that matter the most to you. And that means that we actually need to be able to field people who we think stand for something that matters, stand for something bigger than themselves, and will do right and will keep their word. That's how we fight that.
I love that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Well said. Well said. We're going to give Laura Livengood one more chance. Come on. Do we have any other questions, Laura, from the audience?
Do you support the Off Fossil Fuel Act, Tulsi Gabbard's initiative?
Yes. So I've had a chance to look at it, and I think that it's definitely going in the right direction. I think that I would like to see a few more of the details in it before I would want to fully sign off on it, because I like anything that I support to be something that we could actually do in a reasonable amount of time. And I think that the main thing that I remember from that was the whole stopping the exports of all any sort of natural gas and natural resource product. And I think that right now that might not be the best time for it, but in principle, I do agree with it. But I think there's another way to get there. And so I'd want to talk to them more about it, but I do love the principles behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good answer. Any other questions from the audience, Laura?
Just wondering, Pat asks, any comments on your opponent, Katie Hill, who's also a progressive, at least that's what she's heard. How do you differ from the main platform?
I've been in several forums with Katie, and we actually have pretty different views in a lot of areas. So what I would encourage people to do, on my Facebook page, there's actually a stream of two of the candidate forums that's available for people to view. And you can see where our answers diverge. And I know that we have different views, particularly it's easy to highlight on gun control. I knew people who were killed at Columbine, and I was a student at a school next door in 1999. I was a 17-year-old, and my boyfriend at the time went to Columbine. And it is something that it changes your view of gun violence forever when you're affected by it directly. And in our community, we had many people, well, not many, but several people who were killed during the Route 91 shootings in Vegas a couple months ago. And so I am a big proponent of common sense gun reform. And I think that we really need to be closing the universal background check loopholes. We need to be cracking down on these assault style weapons. We need to be worrying about bump stocks now. That's a new thing in the conversation. And the concealed carry reciprocity issue is a huge, huge problem. We cannot have states with the laxest gun laws making the laws for the rest of the country. What's right for Mississippi or Alabama or Connecticut isn't necessarily right for us here in California. So, and then in addition to that, again, being a scientist, I want to see the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, able to investigate the gun violence epidemic, to study it, to study the causes and what we could do to prevent it. Congress has restricted the CDC's ability to do that since the 90s. And it's time that we start looking into it, because it's not just mass shootings, it's suicide by guns. It's easy access to weapons that's causing domestic violence incidents to be perpetrated again and again with ease and frequency. So, and then also I want to see Congress form a select committee to investigate gun violence too. So, I mean, that's just one example. There's actually a lot of examples. I'm definitely the most progressive candidate in the race. I will say that.
Nice.
And, but I will say too, that because, politics is really nasty a lot of the time. And I know that in our campaign, we candidates, the Democratic candidates, have pledged to be, nice to each other, relatively speaking. So you're not going to see me throwing anybody under the bus in terms of, oh, she said this, he said that. Like, I want what I believe to stand on its own. So, feel free to ask me more questions or differentiate how you'd like. But I will leave it at saying I'm the most progressive candidate in the race.
I really appreciate that. And I like the way you stated it. Here's my views. She's got different views. And, there's nothing attacking there. I just want to state for the record, I went to Columbine, class of '88.
Oh, did you?
And
No way.
my wife's brothers were in the school during the shooting, so it's a small world.
Yeah, I went to Mullen, which is, down the road. Yeah.
I went to Mullen, ninth grade and half of 10th. I got kicked out. But
oh my
it was
God,
on
that's
purpose.
awesome. I think they wanted to kick me out at one point, but, they let me stay.
So they opened Mullen up because it was all boys.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they did. I think it was like 8 or 9 years before I started going there. But I was class of 2000 at Mullen. But I went to public school until high school. My parents said, you're going to go to Catholic school. So, but yeah, my first 2 boyfriends went to Columbine. So most of my friends were there, and it was bad. Have you been since they redid it?
I got a tour from Leland Andres in 2005. I went back, and he walked me right through the school, and they were like, who is this guy? I said, he's got a tour. He's an alumni. He just took me out there. But if you know Leland, he ran that place. So.
Oh yeah. Him and Frankie D. Frankie D was, he was the man when I was going to Mullen, and my friends were all there. So, but no, I mean, it changes everything, and the community. The big thing too. One last thing about gun violence, unless anybody wants to talk about it anymore, but I will say that the thing that just tears me up inside the most is when you hear people after every mass shooting say, "I never thought this could happen here."
Right.
And I want to grab them and go, yes, it can. It can happen anywhere. That is the one big takeaway everyone should know, is that right now, because of the gun laws that we have in place that are not doing enough to protect people, it could happen anywhere, literally.
Right. It absolutely can. And I just want to thank you for bringing up the CDC. It is criminal. I don't even understand how Congress has the power to block them from doing studies on gun violence. It's just insane.
Yeah. It really is. And I mean, that's what we need. If you don't have data and you're looking at problems, you're flying blind again. Like you have your eyes blindfolded and you're just fumbling around in the dark. And that's what they want, because the gun lobby is so powerful and all they care about is making a profit. And so even though most NRA members actually support common sense gun control, gun reform, because they get mad when you say control. But no, when most NRA members actually have said, they've done polls, and most of them support, I think it's plus 80% actually support common sense gun reform. The NRA corporate folks say, nope. And the rest of the gun lobby goes right on board, and they keep, Knight has received money from the NRA and Friends of NRA and all that. So, I mean, he's on board with them. And that is a really personal motivation for me to get him out of office.
Good. We don't need anybody taking money from the NRA. We need to get the NRA out of our government, 100%.
Yes.
We're going to break. You have been awesome, and I wish we had another hour to talk with you, but we don't. We're going to run over anyway. So I'm just going to say right now, would you please come back on our show so we can talk more? Sure,
I'd love to. I mean, this is really enjoyable. You and Laura are great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We're going to talk about one more thing because we have to, because it's just, there's so many things I had, like your mom was an FBI agent. And I put up a slide that said your mom was a badass. We could talk about that for a while. That's really cool. But I want to show everybody this because this ties into UBI. I mean, you guys know that I'm a big Star Trek fan, or at least anybody who's been watching the program for a while. And I believe in universal basic income. I believe that if we're not taking care of individual needs of all of humanity and the planet, for that matter. But, individual needs must be met. Basic needs: food, shelter, water, education, love, care. You can't reach a state of humanity where we can really do the cool things we want to do, like Star Trek. You have got some backing from Tim Russ, Robert Picardo, and John Billingsley talking about you and Star Trek ideals in your campaign and where we're headed. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you feel about UBI and how it might tie into Star Trek in a future for our kids and generations?
Well, I'm really glad you brought it up because my dad was actually in the FBI too, and he was a cyber crimes guy at the end of his career there. And my husband is a cybersecurity expert and is very into tech and future technology. So we talk about this stuff all the time. It literally is our household conversation. And I will say that automation is coming. Artificial intelligence is increasing in its importance every day. And I posted an article this morning on Twitter from Gizmodo that explained how there's a simple sticker that can trick neural networks into identifying anything as a toaster. It could be a banana, it could be a truck, and it would think it was a toaster. So it's, because these things are becoming more prevalent, like through self-driving cars, and we're going to see automation increase in service sector jobs and manufacturing jobs. We need to make sure that we're prepared for that, and that we have so many people. Our population is growing globally, and we need to be ready for the eventuality that we are going to have people who just don't have jobs. So I think that it's something we need to go, all in on studying now. How do we implement making sure that people have an income? And how do we make sure that they can use it in ways that are going to help better their lives and better the lives of people around them? And so I think this is something that we need to prioritize, studying at the government level. And if other, like think tanks want to study it too, they really should, because this is, I think, where we're heading. I really don't think you can get around the fact that as technology makes lives more quote unquote convenient, we need to recognize that it's going to be putting a lot of people out of work. And so we can't stick our heads in the sand and hide from that. And if we want it to be the sort of utopic vision that Star Trek has, with people seeking knowledge and bettering different species from ourselves, bettering their lives as well as the human condition, we need to start thinking about that now, because the future is here. I mean, I'm talking to you over the internet, and I have an electric car that I drove to get here today. So, I'm driving an electric car. What year is this? Oh my gosh, it's 2018. So, we got to get on this. And, when the year in Back to the Future is now behind us, that's a sign that we got to get our acts together.
That's such a great statement, because and I don't know who wrote the book that said this, but it basically been said, we've been robbed. Our generations have been robbed of 100 years of progress, because capitalism has chosen to keep us behind as slaves to corporations instead of moving forward with what humanity could have done.
Yeah, that's actually very striking. I'd love to know where that's from. I'm like a quote junkie, so I love good quotes. But yeah, I think that's the thing is, again, we've had the curiosity squeezed out of us by having to work 9 to 5s or 9 to 9s, depending.
Right.
My husband's parents immigrated to this country, and they had to work double and triple shifts, to put food on the table. So do you think they were able to be curious with their lives? No, of course not. And people deserve the right to fulfill their innate curiosity, and I think that's part of the whole life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that we stand for as a country.
That's awesome. Agreed. Yes. All right. Now, tell everybody where they can go to support you, donate, volunteer, sign up to help, and then we're going to talk about your song choice.
Awesome. Okay, so the easiest place, if you just want to go make a donation, which would be fantastic, you can do jess2018.com/give. That's a link to my Act Blue fundraising page. And then I have a CrowdPack campaign that's going too. The link to that one's a little more difficult to get to, so I don't remember it. But if you search for me on CrowdPack, it's there. My website is jess2018.com, and you can find me on Twitter. My campaign account is at Jess Phoenix 2018, so Jess Phoenix 2018. And my Facebook is facebook.com/JessPHX, which is the letters for the Phoenix airport code. People are like, why PHX? And I'm like, well, it's the abbreviation for Phoenix. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram. My campaign Instagram is a little not that exciting. It's got some stuff on it, but that's Jess Phoenix 2018 too.
Awesome. That's a lot. That's great. You're on a lot of social. That's fantastic.
Oh God. Yeah. I don't shut up that much on Twitter, which, it could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you see it. But I figure it's better to let people know who I am and who they'd be electing than to, keep it under smoke and mirrors, because, we want honesty and integrity from the people that we're going to send to office. It's time for that.
Well, and I mean, on that, we've seen this. I mean, Trump, for as horribly as he's been a catalyst for our unification around, I think, just sense of, being common sense, but we've seen our politicians take to social media and use it to push messages like never before.
Yeah, and it's the way of the future. They're more disconnected from each other in some ways, but more connected in others. And, I think we need to figure out how we can use social media to do the greatest good that we can with it.
Absolutely.
And you asked me about the song choice. I need to answer that part too.
We're going to get to that. We're good.
Okay. I didn't want to miss it. Sorry.
No. Oh, no. That's an important part. We're going to, no. So that's perfect segue. Tell us, Bad Religion, Robin Hood in Reverse, which was your second choice. The first one was blocked everywhere. We don't know why. Tell us about Robin Hood in Reverse and why Bad Religion.
Okay, so Bad Religion, I have loved them since I was around 11, maybe 10.
Nice.
My best friend at the time's older sister was into them and a few other bands, and I got into them. And I have seen them many times because they have cheap tickets because they are like a band for everybody. They are not, they're not like, you have to spend $500 to go see them. Thank God.
Right.
But they are, as the name suggests, Bad Religion. They're not anti-religion. That's the thing. So it's saying that, they have an element of an edge to them, and they're very, very political. If people haven't listened to them, I know they're punk. They're second wave punk or second generation punk from Southern California. And they sing about some amazing things. They sing about, they did a whole protest album pretty much about George W. Bush. And they sing about war. They sing about poverty. They sing about climate. They sing about religion when it's doing things that they think are wrong. And, I grew up listening to this, and it's funny because my parents are Republican. And so I thought, I must be Republican too, until I sort of got out on my own a little bit and went, oh, hey, this isn't what I believe in. And then it sort of made sense. Everything kind of clicked when I went, I've been listening to this very liberal music since I was a kid. But Robin Hood in Reverse in particular is actually about Citizens United. It even says Citizens United in the song. And Robin Hood in Reverse is exactly what we are seeing, not just with Citizens United, but now as a consequence of that, with what the GOP tax scam / bill is doing. It's really robbing from the poor and giving to the rich. And so that's what this song talks about. And it talks about the frustration that you see from that and kind of the feeling of powerlessness. But I like to think that, yes, this is what's going on now, but because we see it, that means we can fix it.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think we can fix it because we've got people like you running for office. So thank you for doing that. Laura Livengood, thank you for being here and addressing the questions. I know you're, not feeling good. You're muted, though. That's all right. That's all right.
You didn't want to hear me coughing. I want you to join us next Monday night for Allison Hartson, who's running for Senate in California. We'll be meeting her on the 8th at 7 p.m.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, I didn't remember that. Allison Hartson coming up on the 8th. And on the 13th, we have the Housing and Homelessness Town Hall for Progressive Democracy in Washington. And we are working on putting that together. We need you guys to go and share that. It's on our YouTube page. We really want everybody to watch that live stream. They're going to have Tim Harris as the opening speaker, and then they're going to have a panel. It's going to be really good talking about solutions to housing and homelessness in Washington and across the nation. So thank you so much, Jess Phoenix, for joining us. You are awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been excellent. This is one of my favorite interviews I've done. Please have me back whenever you want. I'm around.
Love to. And we invite your opponents to come on and do a roundtable and talk about the issues.
Ooh, awesome.
Even Steve. Come on, Steve.
Yeah, Steve.
Bye, everybody. Bad Religion, Robin Hood in Reverse. And Jess, you can leave whenever you want. Thank you so much. Or you can stay and jam.
And people, wait, what did he say? What the fuck did he say? It couldn't last, they had to crash. Some parties are just made that way, but when the bell rings, the boys will sing. Swing low, sweet precariat. Let's say we try to get this right. Set the plutocrat to Jesus Christ. And when the old fox, fearing the worst, made his entrance in a hearse, then the knight in black robes all went berserk. Oh yeah, this is a right. Set the plutocrat to Jesus Christ. And when the old fox fearing the worst made his entrance in a hearse, then the knight in black